At this time, I will reconvene into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent Board of Trustees for April 18th, 2024, beginning at 6:38. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. One or more trustees may participate in this meeting via video conference call. A quorum of the Board of Trustees will be physically present at the Administration Building. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our meetings are open to the public, and we welcome everyone, and we thank you for participating in public education. While our meetings are open to the public, this is a meeting, and we have business to conduct. Disruptions will not be permitted. Anyone who disrupts the meeting or speaks when others are speaking may be asked to leave or be escorted out by our policemen. We welcome civic input, but we insist that we remain respectful and civil. Thank you for your cooperation. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join Dr. Reich in leading us in the pledges.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We will now move to our open forum for agenda items. May I please call Joanna Cordoza? Is Ms. Cordoza here? There you are. We're doing things this evening in a little bit different order.
Yes, you are. You caught me off guard.
Let me say that.
Oh, I can't?
There.
Oh, okay, I got it now.
Okay, Ms. Cardoza, this is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speaker. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for open forum. You will have 3 minutes.
All right. Good evening, President Fowler, members of the board, Dr. Smith. I'm actually here tonight to give y'all kudos. I'm here tonight as a Carter Junior High and Sam Houston High School alumna to say thank you for honoring Coach Rodriguez's life in such a significant and meaningful way. Although Coach Rodriguez did not grow up in East Arlington, he embraced, loved, and believed in the students of this community. He loved his students as his own and made the ultimate sacrifice for them. East Arlington is a Latino community, and naming the new junior high in honor of Coach Rodriguez will give current and future students from East Arlington an amazing role model to look up to, and will keep the memory of Coach Rodriguez alive for many generations to come. And thank you so much. This means a lot to that community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cardoza. Thank you, Frank. Fernando Benavides. Welcome, Mr. Benavides.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Fowler, Dr. Smith, members of the board. I'm here tonight to support your decision to name the new junior high on tonight's agenda. I'm sure you had many names of individuals worthy of honoring as a school namesake. Judy Thomas was one of those names that comes to my mind. She was an educator and an advocate for students and families in the Sam Houston Network for more than 45 years before she passed away in 2019. I hope the board will consider her as a namesake in the future of one of the facilities in East Arlington. But for members of the public who don't know Joey Rodriguez, I'd like to share my thoughts as principal at Sam Houston from 2012 to 2019. I was honored to observe Joey Rodriguez teach and support our most at-risk students in our credit recovery, on-campus disciplinary placement, and PE programs. Like many teachers at SAM, Joey's ability to motivate, encourage, inspire, and mentor our students helped to develop their self-efficacy, which we know as educators is critical to the demographic student population served in East Arlington. Due to circumstances beyond their control, many students come to us with significant gaps in their social, emotional, academic, and athletic skills. Joey understood the power of teacher efficacy, the belief that our students could compete and achieve at the highest levels possible with the right support, guidance, dedication, and hard work of our staff. He taught his students how to win, and he taught them that losing didn't define them, life skills that go beyond high school. The coaching strategies, dedication, and training provided by Joey's leadership permeated through the boys soccer program and left a lasting imprint on the culture of our campus and our community. I want to close by reading the pregame speech Joey gave at the Region 1 championship game in 2015, which qualified us for the state tournament for the first time in history. With Joey's permission, I used the video of his speech as professional development to help our teachers understand the significance of student and teacher efficacy. You guys worked hard to get here. You deserve to be here. It's time to come out and give it your best. Time to come out and give it your all. Because again, you deserve to be here. If you notice, there are only 2 teams left. One team from the Metroplex. It's you. There's no Capel, no Southlake, no Mansfield, no Martin. It's you. Hardworking kids from East Arlington, right here where you deserve to be. So for the next 80 minutes, that is who you represent. Kids that after practice, they walk home. Hardworking kids from hardworking families, you deserve to be here. Now you go and show them what we do. You show them everything you've got on the field because that's who you represent. You represent your families, you represent your school, you represent your teammates, your classmates, your teachers, your principals. Let's go show them who we are. Thank you for honoring Joey Rodriguez's legacy and the positive impact he has made as an educator and coach in the Sam Houston Network. I have no doubt that the students and staff at Joey Rodriguez Junior High will see themselves in that building and learn they deserve to be there, hardworking kids from hardworking families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benavides. Juan Villarreal. Welcome, Mr. Villarreal.
Thank you. President Fowler, School Board, and Dr. Smith, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak about Joey. Coach Rodriguez was more than just a coach. He was a guiding light on and off the field, leaving an enduring impression on the lives he touched. Coach Rodriguez had a unique gift, the ability to connect with students in a way that surpassed simple mentorship. He spoke their language. He listened to their concerns and inspired them to strive for greatness. As a father figure to many, he instilled and modeled values of resilience, determination, and excellence. He often shared with his athletes this simple advice: to listen and be respectful, work hard, and be a good person. Very simple words that impacted many. On the field, Coach Rodriguez's impact was profound. He transformed our soccer program at Sam Houston High School, attracting a multitude of students eager to learn from the very best. Under his guidance, our team reached unprecedented heights, making 2 appearances at the state championship, thanks to Coach Rodriguez's coaching expertise. Beyond his accomplishments, Coach Rodriguez embodied love and dedication to his players and our entire school community. His affection for his family was evident, and as we celebrate this historic moment, let us continue to rally around the family with our unwavering support. Coach Rodriguez taught us about love, resilience, and the power of making a positive impact. Now, we have an opportunity to uphold his legacy, to inspire others as he inspired us. Given his profound influence, I propose we honor Coach Rodriguez's memory by renaming this new junior high after him. As a community, we can ensure the future generations will understand his remarkable contributions and strive to emulate his extraordinary character, which will create a culture of success that will fill the halls in the rooms of this new school, which will transcend back to Sam Houston High School. Please consider voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villarreal. Eric White.
Good
Welcome,
evening.
Mr. White.
Good evening, President Fowler, Board, Dr. Smith. I'm trying to, y'all set the stage pretty strong. Coach Rodriguez was a kid magnet. And that's, as an athletic director, what you want coaches to be. We had to add coaches. They had, we normally have 3 soccer coaches. They had 4 teams. Kids loved him. He changed their lives. What he did for kids is way more important than going to state, is way more important than soccer wins. What he did is awesome. And that's what we want kids, our coaches to do, is when they come in the program and when they leave, that they are a better kid, a better person, ready to contribute to society. And he magnified that. You don't get the number of kids in your program, you don't get those things to happen without having a heart and a love for kids. And that's what he magnifies. I really can't say anything else other than that. I hope we have the opportunity to name that school and carry on his legacy. I can't imagine a school being named after me. What an honor and a legacy that would be. And I think for Arlington ISD to do that would be awesome. So I hope we can make that happen, and I appreciate all y'all.
Thank you, Mr. White. We now move to discussion action item A. This item is the naming of the new junior high school scheduled to open in the fall of 2025. Do I have a motion? Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, President Fowler. I move that the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees officially name the new junior high school scheduled to open in the fall of 2025 Joey Rodriguez Junior High School.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow. Whoops, hang on, Ms. Richardson?
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Ms. McMurrow and a second by Ms. Richardson. Please vote. Oh, discussion. Is there any discussion? We'll start with Dr. Reich.
There we go. Thank you, President Fowler. Joey Rodriguez dedicated 12 years of exemplary service to the students of Sam Houston High School as the head coach of the boys soccer program, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to excellence and mentorship.
Ms. Richardson?
Under his leadership, the Sam Houston High School boys soccer team achieved 12 consecutive playoff appearances, 2 state championship appearances in 2015 and in 2017. This was the first and the second in the school's history.
Ms. McMurrow?
Coach Rodriguez's profound impact on the Sam Houston soccer program led to significant growth, necessitating the hiring of additional coaching staff to meet the increasing demand for participation, a testament to his popularity and effectiveness as a coach and mentor.
Mr. Chapa?
His accolades, including multiple recognitions as District Coach of the Year and Teacher of the Year, reflect his outstanding contributions to the educational and athletic communities of Arlington ISD. In 2018, the Sam Houston soccer team was ranked #1 in the nation.
Coach Rodriguez served with distinction, on the Texas Association of Soccer Coaches Board, and as an advisor for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and as a coach for the Juventus Premier FC, further exemplifying his leadership and dedication to youth development. Ms. Haynes.
He has been described as a kid magnet and a father figure, illustrating his profound personal impact on the lives of many young individuals.
Mr. Will Banks.
Coach Rodriguez's battle with COVID-19 and his subsequent death on October 17th, 2021, at the age of 44, has left a lasting sorrow in the hearts of all that knew him. Yet his legacy continues to inspire and uplift this entire community.
We are honored that Joey Rodriguez chose to live out a part of his life's mission with us here in the Arlington ISD. And we want to be sure his legacy lives on too, which is why we are so proud to announce that in 2025, the newest school in Arlington, Texas will be named Joey Rodriguez Junior High School. But we still need to take a vote. We still need to take a vote. Frank, are we ready to vote? Please vote. The vote carries in the affirmative. Now we can applaud. The first item on the agenda is our, pardon me, we're going to take a recess. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Are we going to, we're going to do the performance first, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
we missed the student performance.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All right, Ms. Foster.
Thank you all. I don't know about y'all, but we're going to need a minute here to do something fun. So come on down, guys. Y'all are going to get set up. I'm going to read a little bit about you. They need no introduction, y'all. It's the Mariachi Tejano from Sam Houston High School. They truly are the pride of Sam Houston. They do everything in the district and in the community. We invite them to presentations just like this one on a regular basis. They play at elementary, junior high, high schools, community events, anywhere we can get them to say yes to play, we want them to. They have actually appeared on a lot of live radio and television broadcasts. They've been live on Telemundo and lots of other places because they are so popular. In 2019 and in 2022, they advanced to the State Mariachi Festival. They received a Distinguished Performance Award. El Mariachi Tejano also received a First Division at the 8th Annual Grand Prairie Mariachi Festival Open Division. These students work hard every day. They do more than most. Successive coaches have a phrase that says, there's never a traffic jam at the extra mile. And that is true for these students because they practice on the weekends, after hours, anytime they can to be the very best that they can. Today, they're going to perform a special song by Jose Alfredo Jimenez. It's in honor of Coach Rodriguez. It's called No Volver, which means I will return.
Y un aplauso para el Mariachi Tejano, sí señor. lejos me encuentre de ti, cuando quieras que esté yo contigo, no hallarás un recuerdo de mí, tendrás más amores conmigo. Y te juro que no volveré, aunque me hagas pedazos la vida. Si una vez con locura te amé, ya de mi alma estarás despedida. No volveré, te lo juro por Dios que me mira, te lo digo llorando de rabia. No volveré, no pararé hasta ver que mi llanto ha formado un arroyo de olvido anegado, donde yo tu recuerdo ahogaré. Y puro mariachi tejano, sí señor. Fuimos nubes que el viento apartó, fuimos piedras que siempre chocamos, gotas de aguas que el sol resecó, borracheras que no terminamos. En el tren de la ausencia me voy, mi boleto no tiene regreso, lo que tengas de mí te lo doy, pero yo te devuelvo tus besos. No volveré, te lo juro por Dios que me mira, te lo digo llorando de rabia. No volveré, no pararé hasta ver que mi llanto ha formado un arroyo de olvido anegado, donde yo tu recuerdo ahogaré.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I took things a little bit out of order because I felt like we needed a little bit of a break. And now we have some special guests with us tonight who wish to speak during the presentation. Please welcome Anthony Chris, a retired coach from Sam Houston High School. Welcome, Mr. Chris.
President Fowler, Dr. Smith, board members, it's a pleasure to be here today. When you said recess, I was like, I have to wait 15 more minutes? So when I was sitting here and I was thinking, what do you say when everything's already been said? Great speeches by everyone, great recollections by everyone, and I just thought about what else could I add? And then I looked at Coach Rodriguez and I thought about his legacy and his impact. I think about the schools that are named after football coaches, Coach Peach, Coach Workman, and Coach Rodriguez always told me that he was a football coach too. He said, Coach, not football, but football. So it's so nice to understand, and it's so appropriate that you name after a football coach, the best football coach that this town has ever seen. I thought about being able to go by Joey Rodriguez Junior High and think about the lasting impact that he had, the impact that he had on me. I'm getting ahead of myself. I can't name the school, but I was thinking Rodriguez Rangers. He loved the Texas Rangers. He and I would occasionally go to Ranger games, and, you know, especially my night was dollar hot dog night. Hey, coach, I got you. I have a Lexus. I got free parking, free tickets. Let's go. But he was so impactful to students. And I can remember telling him the first time that I met him is that, Coach, you're going to go to state. We're on the fence. And he leaned up against the fence. He said, Coach, we haven't even been to regionals. I said, Coach, but I believe in you. And I know what you do. I know what you mean to kids. I know your work ethic. And I know we're going to get there. I was the nervous wreck. Mama Rodriguez will tell you. I never saw a game finished. I walked, I paced, I couldn't do it. But Coach Rodriguez would tell me, Coach, we're going to be okay. The day of the state championship game, I pull up to him, get ready to get on the bus. He said, Coach, I have good news and I have bad news. I said, well, Coach, give me the good news first. He said, we're on our way to play for the state title. I said, what's the bad news? We're not going to have Jose. I almost passed out. He said, but Coach, we're going to be fine. And that's who Coach Rodriguez was. He always saw the best. He always saw the positive. He always saw the good in people. And I just want to let you guys know tonight that it was a great decision. I love the decision, and I will be there on that first day of school when this happens to welcome all those kids, to let them know this legacy that they're going to be a part of. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jose Ortiz, who is currently playing soccer at SMU.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Ortiz, current student athlete at Southern Methodist University and former player for Coach Rodriguez at Sam Houston. I am here today to talk more on a personal impact he had on me. I'm here to talk about the impact he had on me, not only as a player, but as a person as well. Being with him for 4 years taught me so many life lessons that I still hold to this day. One of the things being not only great in the field, but also in the classroom. He wanted all his players not only to be about soccer, but care about his grades as well. He also wanted everyone to attend college because he knew the value of a degree. Personally, to me, he was more than just a coach. He was my best friend. I could talk to him about problems in the field, but most importantly about life. He always wants the best for his players and offered the best knowledge and solutions to our problems. Because that's how he was. He did only wanted the best for his family, for his staff, but most importantly for his players. He will always have a smile on his face no matter how good or bad the day it was. As he always told us to smile even when we didn't feel like it. His charisma and happiness was something that those who got the chance to be around him encounter. He was a great father, a great coach, but most importantly, he was a great friend. I still remember how proud he was when I told him about SMU offer me and me accepting me, and me accepting that offer. The hug he gave me, like a father will give his son to celebrate accomplishment. God took him too early of this world, but with time I learned never to question God's will. He has a purpose for every single little thing that happens in life. I know he's watching over his family and friends right now. Having our junior high named after him will be the right decision. The value his name has when said to others is big. We think of how devoted he was to his job and family, the dedication, love he had for hundreds of players that coached me over time, over the past years. And most importantly, the success he wanted for us. This will also have a great impact in the Hispanic community. In Arlington, I see one of our own being honored for his legacy. Thank you.
Please welcome Frankie Figueroa, a former Sam Houston student who also played for Coach Rodriguez. Welcome, Frankie.
Hello. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, for me, it's very hard. I want to start by saying my name is Francisco Figueroa. I'm a coach at Sam Houston High School. Not only I work under Coach Rodriguez, I also played for him his very first year at Sam Houston High School. For me, it is an honor for being here tonight and talk about everything that Coach Rodriguez did. For me, Coach Rodriguez was a role model. He was like a dad at work. He is the reason why I'm doing what I love to do and working at the school that I want to be working at. I want to help kids and continue the legacy with kids the way he did. I'm gonna share a story. I remember my senior year, after soccer season, I told him, I want to do what you do. He was like, really? I'm like, yes, coach. I'm like, well, you're gonna go to school, you get a degree, then you call me. And I was like, that's it? You know? So he stayed in touch with me. He was always texting me, calling me after every semester, asking me how my grades were, if I passed my classes or not, something that my parents didn't do, but he did. And working under him, man, it was a learning experience every day. I had to figure out a lot of things on my own, but he knew that was the best way for me to learn. He was always helping anyone that needed advice. I'm also super blessed that I got to meet not only Coach Rodriguez, but I got to meet Joey Rodriguez. Without the impact he had on the district, naming the school after him is well deserved. Thank you.
And we're honored to have Joey's family with us tonight for this special presentation. Please welcome Lola and Milo Rodriguez. Mila.
My name is Mila Rodriguez, and this is my sister Lola Rodriguez, daughters of late Coach Joey Rodriguez. On behalf of the Rodriguez family, we would like to thank Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees and the AISD family for this opportunity. Our mother would normally be the one to speak and represent anything regarding our dad. However, our parents have raised us to be leaders, to be bold, and as the next generation, we gladly accept the challenge to also be a voice and representation of our dad and his many works. This is what this is all about, providing opportunities for young people to find hope, thrive, and grow, which this school will do for many more students to come. The Rodriguez family is committed to being part of this legacy through Joey Rodriguez Junior High. We vow to be supporting members of the campus through time, service, and connection. Our hope is that the young people who walk through the doors of this beautiful campus will find refuge and recognition. We are grateful and proud to share our family's name with the Arlington community, and thank you for the time and honor.
And now we will take a 15-minute reception break. Next, we will consider administrative ratifications and appointments. Dr. Smith?
Thank you, President Fowler. I would like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Do I have a motion? Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Leanne Haynes and a second from Mr. Chapa. Please vote.
It's up there, yep.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we move to
Hold on
consider interim.
one second. Yep.
Oh, okay.
We're excited tonight, in case you can't tell. We're really excited, and I invite you, Ms. Danita James, to stand as the new principal for Berry Elementary. I have a feeling that this group doesn't need me to tell you about Ms. James, but I'm going to tell you about Ms. James too. I had the pleasure of walking through Berry with Ms. James recently and also meeting with her in my office. She's got a great history in Arlington ISD and in other school districts, teaching at various levels at the elementary schools. She has been the interim principal recently at Berry. She's been a principal in residency in our district for a couple years at Patrick Elementary, an assistant principal at McNutt and at Spear, and a school counselor at Webb. She's also taught in the classroom and has been the 8th grade special services coordinator, or pre-K through 8th grade special services coordinator early on in her career. Her experience is vast, and her leadership, you can tell. Her smile is infectious on that campus, and I can't wait to see what she does at Berry Elementary School. So Danita, welcome and congratulations.
Well, congratulations. I think you have found a new family. I love those signs. I love them. We now move to action item A, consider interim legislative agenda. And Dr. Smith.
Thank you, President Fowler. The next action item is for the board to consider the 2025 interim legislative agenda. Last meeting, Dr. Hill presented the agenda to you all. One trustee provided comment during the meeting, and tonight we bring you a slightly revised version incorporating that feedback from the last meeting for you to consider as the Arlington ISD interim 2025 legislative agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Do I have a motion? I have a motion for Ms. McMurrow. Do I have a second?
I think I have to read it. Oh, okay.
We already did it, so we got
a
motion in a second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. We now move on to discussion item. Dr. Smith?
I am currently flipping pages. I apologize.
The progress report for Board of Trustees continuing education credit.
Oh, I believe that's you.
I am happy to report all trustees have exceeded the training hours required by the Texas State Board of Education. Now we move on to House Bill 1605 update.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, tonight I invite someone that is very familiar to you all, Dr. Wirtz. House Bill 1605 was enacted at the last legislative session and has significant impacts on school districts. Tonight, Dr. Wirtz is going to provide us with an update on that legislation.
Good evening, President Fowler, members of the board, Dr. Smith. I want to start off by first congratulating you on naming the new junior high school after Joey Rodriguez. What an honor and a blessing to that family. It was a blessing to be here tonight. I'm here to give you an update on House Bill 1605, which was passed in the last legislative session. And the reason for my discussion item tonight is to provide you with an overview of the bill so that there's some understanding around the potential impact that that bill might have on future instructional material selection and the implementation of those materials in school. So what I thought I would do at the beginning is just connect the dots about how all the parts work in terms of where it starts when standards are adopted by the State Board of Education all the way to when kids take STAR. And what happens is the State Board of Education adopts what kids learn in the classroom. We call those text essential knowledge and skills. And then instructional materials are designed for teachers to utilize in their design of lessons for the implementation of those standards or the teaching of those standards in the classroom. And those usually show up, of course, in curriculum, in scope and sequence, in content resources and other companion documents that we generate. Materials are then utilized in the classroom, and they are used by teachers to facilitate the actual classroom experience that students have utilizing research-based practices. And then the state comes around and assesses at the end of the year the level of proficiency that students have against those standards. 1605 was generated in a way that establishes a new process for which instructional materials are adopted. And they establish a singular process called Instructional Materials Review and Approval, which we refer to as IMRA process. It replaces the old process, which was managed by the State Board of Education. They used to call it a proclamation. And then they leveraged the Texas Resource Review process to actually identify which resources would be eligible or at least adopted or on their list or endorsed by them. It takes several components that used to be part of the proclamation process and puts them under a single process that's governed by the State Board of Education. Tonight I want to talk about 7 distinct areas that are outlined in 1605 and what the implications of those areas are when we go about our process in future years in adopting resource materials, and share some information about the timelines that are related to those steps that we'll talk about and potential impact on future budget. So the definition of high quality instructional materials are outlined. It's pretty clear. Some things you'll notice in this slide that are different than the previous conversations. It used to be where instructional materials only needed to cover 50% of the standards in order for them to be eligible for consideration, because the textbook, for example, is only one resource that's typically used as part of the instructional process in the classroom. Now, materials that are considered high-quality instructional materials by the State Board of Education must cover 100% of the TEKS for the course or the grade level that's being taught. They have to be aligned to evidence-based practices that are relevant to the specific core content area that's actually being provided for instruction in the classroom. The materials have to support all student groups and provide differentiated and scaffolding supports within the materials, and those should support the roles of students that are students with disabilities, English language learners, gifted and talented students. There should also be frequent progress monitoring embedded into those instructional materials, and they should have aligned assessments available. And they should also include supports for teachers as they implement those materials in the classroom, as well as what they call lesson level materials or actual products that teachers can then use in the classroom in their instruction. The new process that's been designed that we call IMRA now, which is part of the State Board of Education, has 6 major components that are part of that process that I want to describe for you tonight. One is what I already mentioned, which is the products have to align to 100% of the standards. There's also a quality review process that's established where the materials are reviewed to make sure they're supporting the proficiency levels that are expected at the grade level. And they're also, if it's literacy based, complying with the 3 cueing ban, which I'm going to talk about tonight. There's also a suitability and appropriate review that is examined, which looks to make sure that the materials are suitable for the grade level and ages that are being taught, and that there's no obscene or harmful materials embedded in the materials. There's also a review to check for factual errors to make sure that the materials are available in both print and in digital format, depending upon the needs of the system. And that vendors establish a parent portal where parents can access and review those materials of their own free will. So they have expanded rights or at least abilities to see what materials are being used in the classroom. The first thing I want to share with you a little bit is about the quality review rubrics. There are different rubrics. One is around suitability and one is around quality review. And so I wanted to share a little bit about what's in those rubrics and how those rubrics are used by a group of reviewers to make a recommendation to TEA, which then finds itself in front of the State Board of Education. The quality review rubrics consist of two types. There is an implementation quality that's looked at, and then there's learning quality. And the implementation quality really has three core areas. Intentional instructional design, which really looks to make sure that it's well designed, that the units and lessons are aligned, and that there's vertical alignment. They also look for progress monitoring and also that there's supports for all learners. So there's differentiation and scaffolding supports that are embedded in the instructional materials. They're also reviewing for learning quality to make sure that it's aligned to research and that it promotes the grade level proficiencies for the course that's being taught. And embedded in that are 5 different specific areas. And the first one is around phonics rule compliance, which basically ensures that literacy instruction also provides explicit and systematic phonics instruction in the primary grades. They also evaluate foundational skills to make sure they're explicit and sequenced appropriately, that there is knowledge coherence, and that the materials help to connect background knowledge and key academic vocabulary across not only content areas but grade levels and topics. It's also looking for text quality to ensure that the text itself is done in a way that's well crafted and that the text has increased complexity over time, and that the materials are grounded in evidence using literacy and informational text, so that reading, writing, and speaking are grounded in those things. A suitability rubric is also leveraged as part of the review process to look for, as we were talking about earlier, subject and grade level appropriateness and text coverage. The suitability rubric is approved by the state board, and it outlines also not only prohibited content but also specific things that reviewers can flag along the way. What you'll notice on the screen in front of you is an example of screenshots of what that rubric, what reviewers would use. There's an opportunity for the reviewers who are selected from educators. Actually, there's a solicitation from TEA to identify people like classroom teachers who want to serve as reviewers of materials. And they're paid to do it over a period of time. And they provide, using these rubrics, specific feedback about the materials that they're looking at against the standards that are articulated in the rubrics. And that information is then shared with TEA. The rubrics right now that are part of the current IMRA cycle that were adopted earlier for the 2024 cycle are focused really around K through 5, reading, language arts, and phonics for Spanish and English, and then also mathematics. The reason I bring this up, which we'll talk about in a minute, is in the past, our proclamation put us on a cycle, so you knew specifically which content areas were going to be happening, which were going to come up on a proclamation in which years, which allowed you to be strategic in the way that you budgeted and planned for when those adoptions would occur. Right now, that cadence in terms of when those rubrics will be ready for review by content area have not been established yet by the State Board of Education, and so in the situation right now, while the reading rubrics are just being adopted and new materials will be forthcoming, at least the new list, there are many districts that already went through reading just recently and already purchased materials that'll have to be reconsidered, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. So what happens is the rubrics the content areas are defined where the rubrics are going to be leveraged. Those rubrics are utilized by a review committee, and they use that format that I just gave you to provide feedback to TEA. TEA then gathers all the data and all the information from the feedback from the reviewers and generates reports, which include public comments. And the reports are like what you see in front of you, which really articulate specifically how aligned the materials are that are being provided to the State Board of Education for consideration, how aligned they are to their standards for recommendation. And then the State Board of Education then can take this report and either adopt those materials and basically endorse them, or they can reject them. And then from that endorsement, a list is generated from which a district can now purchase materials or start to select materials. One key part about this process is it also includes something that's called open education resources. And when I talk about open education resources tonight, I'm specifically talking about resources that are generated and owned by the Texas Education Agency. They have worked on developing Tier 1 instructional materials specifically for K-8, English language arts, and mathematics. They own the intellectual property around these materials. The adoption of these materials following 1605 will only be available if they're free in perpetuity for Texans, and they're eligible to be edited and updated by TEA based on feedback from stakeholders. You may have heard some of these things because during COVID, TEA's response to provide resources to school districts often fell in the open resources area. And there's been an evolution of those materials and their design over time. What you see in front of you is a timeline of how those things have kind of occurred and when they were in response to COVID or not. What I want to kind of fast forward you to is if you go to the far right-hand side of the slide in front of you, you're going to see the 25-26 school year. That's the year when TA will be publishing their what is being called as Edition 1 in mathematics and Edition 1 in reading. And these resources are important to note because the adoption of these resources also come with funding, which I'm about to explain. They are ISBN specific. So if you had, for example, Amplify as an adopted material in 2024, and the new edition 1 comes out, and there were changes that were made in the edition from the year before, and it generates a new ISBN. The old adopted one that you had the year before is no longer eligible for the additional money. You have to take the new one. So what I'm going to share with you is basically how this works. We have an instructional materials and technology allotment, which we brought to you at the last board meeting about the materials that we were purchasing using that funding source. Right now, for the 24-25 biennium, we receive $171.82 per student and an additional $15.58 per EB student or English, an emerging bilingual student. There are new funding sources outlined in 1605, and they come in the amount of $40 and $20, and they are two different funding sources. So the way I would kind of describe it is they almost function like a grant with more restrictive requirements, and they work their way over to more flexibility. So on the farthest right-hand side, the most restrictive requirement is the $20. The $20 is $20 extra per student that's enrolled in the district that the district has eligibility to use to print the materials that they choose to buy from the open education resource list. So if you purchase materials from the if you purchase materials from the open education resource list, you can then access the $20 per student to print those materials if you want to. This is a use or lose funding source. If you choose to use the funding source in the year that it's given to you, you have access to it. If you don't use that funding source in the year that it's given to you, that $20 for that year goes away and you don't have access to it in the next year. The $40 is cumulative. So school districts can strategically decide how to really think about their funding in terms of IMAT funding or instructional materials and technology allotment funding, and when resources will be adopted, because the $40 for each student, and it literally is the total enrollment of the students times $40 that's provided to the district, is eligible for use if the materials you're choosing to adopt are on the State Board of Education instructional materials list. And so if you don't use that money in 1 year, it just stays in the account and you have access to use in future years. So for example, last year we had $40 that was eligible because the bill was passed. This year, $40 more is in the account again. So now you have a total, all districts now have a total of $80 this year that's in what I would call like the bank account. Whatever funding you don't use, it just stays there and you have access to it. When our textbooks are purchased and we purchase materials on the EMAT system, it's structured in such a way, they're redoing it, it's structured in such a way so that it will utilize the funding sources that are most restricted if the things you're buying are eligible first and work its way down so that you're not accidentally utilizing material funding that you could accumulate over time, and you're accidentally letting go of money that if you don't use, you lose. The system is structured in such a way that districts are prevented from doing that. It will use the most restrictive funding source first and work its way down, which is actually a positive. The reason this is important to note in terms of future years is there is decision making that has to happen, because you're incentivized as a school district by access to $20 extra to utilize materials that are specifically created by the Texas Education Agency. However, our charge as a school system is to make sure that we're identifying resources that are meeting the state standard in terms of State Board of Education, but also the needs of our community. And so there may be opportunities where we may decide that it's better for our students to utilize resources that are not necessarily designed by TEA. And if that's a recommendation that comes, it also comes with the understanding that there's a source of funding that that as a system we're recommending not to utilize. So I bring that all to the board's attention simply because there are different moving parts in terms of our discussions when we think about instructional materials, and some of which come with attachments to funding sources that we may or may be recommending to use or not use over time. The other thing that's different about 1605 is parent portals. Right now, if you are a new vendor generating instructional materials that are part of the IMRA process, so all of the reading materials that will be eventually eligible that people will be adopting, which will start in the process, that process will start in December of this actual calendar year is when the list will be made available. Those will have to have a parent portal available attached to them so that parents can have access to see in detail what students are being utilized in the classroom. It also includes what is called a local classroom review. So the intention of the local classroom review is to do two things: is to report how consistently instructional materials are being used in the classroom that are being adopted by the school system, and how consistently assignments that students are receiving from their teachers are on grade level or not. Now, there are rubrics for conducting a review that are being developed by TEA and that will be eventually approved by the State Board of Education. But a review can be ordered by the school system, so they'll have a vendor and a school system can choose to go through a review of their own volition to ask those two questions. And it can also be requested by a parent, and that process starts in an informal way. Right now, neither of these reviews are eligible to begin because the state has not approved the standards, the rubrics, or the vendors. So individual parent requests initially, right now, they would be processed at the campus level in an informal way, but no formal reviews are eligible because the rubrics haven't been adopted by the State Board of Education and the process hasn't come out yet. One other topic in 1605 that you may hear about is around planning time. And basically what it indicates in 1605 is that a district cannot require a classroom teacher for a foundation curriculum course to use their biweekly planning, which is the 450 minutes every 10 days, for planning, for creating or selecting instructional materials to initially cover their course that they're teaching. The important part around this is that you can't require it, but it doesn't prevent a teacher from choosing it. So right now in Arlington ISD, we don't have a requirement on teachers during their planning time that they use their planning time for a specific purpose. The planning time is their planning time, and they're able to use it to plan lessons if they want, to grade papers, to interact with parents. That's their own choice. The law just kind of underscores that point, which is you cannot say to a teacher, you have to curate and create original materials during this time frame, but that's not our standard anyway. The last part, the other part I wanted to bring up was around the prohibition of the 3Qing. 3Qing is basically a method that's utilized in reading instruction, and this is really designed to help. It's part of what we used to use in reading instruction outside of what we call the science of teaching reading, and it was a strategy used to help where students were drawing on contextual clues to try to understand or comprehend what they're reading rather than sounding words out. So some things that teachers would use is terms of 3Qing or sentences, they would use like, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? Use your context clues. And it would be a way or a strategy that was leveraged in the classroom to help students utilize the context that they were reading about to overcome their inability to read specific words. And that now is outlawed, or it's illegal. So now what we've done is we've gone through our instructional materials and our curriculum to make sure that 3Qing cues were eliminated. And now new materials that are adopted in the area of literacy won't have any of the 3Qing strategies embedded in them anymore. It'll be more leaning towards the science of teaching, reading, and decodable text. And the last thing is there will be new updated reporting requirements. So annually, as we did last board meeting, we've always had a tech certification process that we've had to do with the board. In upcoming future years, we'll have to report to TA specifically which instructional materials were used in the previous school year and the cost that we spent on those instructional materials. The intention behind this reporting is really to help TEA understand how much districts are spending across the state in the purchasing of instructional materials to make sure that vendors are really providing fair pricing and that they're complying with the regulations. So again, these are the 7 main areas that the code is now requiring that we consider when we adopt instructional materials. And we'll be applying these as we begin to move forward and bring forth recommendations in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Do we have any trustees with questions or comments? Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Fowler. I want to start by asking about the prohibition on 3Qing. The way that you presented that made it sound like this was sort of a pedagogical tool that teachers might use if they felt it was necessary to help kids achieve mastery of something. Was there a movement in education or among teachers that this was not a best practice or a harmful practice? Because it seems a little odd to me that we are, by legislation passed by legislators, most of whom aren't teachers, specifically banning certain types of pedagogy.
I can't speak to whether there was a movement, but there has been some research that's been elevated by the Texas Education Agency. It really is the foundation for the reading academies that everyone's participating in around the science of teaching reading and the refuting by research that this strategy works in terms of teaching kids how to read. Typically in old practices where we would have balanced literacy or guided reading, this was not an uncommon strategy that teachers would use. The challenge around it that was demonstrated in the research from researchers was that this strategy was preventing kids from really learning how to read specific words, where they were using context clues to make sense of what they were reading, but they never were actually reading the word. They were either substituting or deleting or skipping it. And so the real emphasis that's coming out of the agency now, which is really part of the reading academies and this concept of the science of teaching reading, is leveraging research-based practice that teach kids how to navigate through words that are hard and to utilize it rather than predictable text in the early primary grades, utilize more decodable text that teach kids strategies to how to actually physically work through words that they don't know how to read them. So that's the essence of it, but it really wasn't, I don't know, necessarily a movement, whereas more updated research around the science of teaching reading.
Okay, is this something that maybe this bill just highlighted it and that's why we're seeing it here, or is this a normal thing for the legislature to legislatively prohibit something that could be, a recommended to emphasize or de-emphasize a certain practice?
I personally, in my career, have not necessarily seen specific strategies that have been legislated, but this is probably the first time I've experienced it. But it's based in what I shared earlier and TA's recommendation about the right way to teach reading.
Okay. Yeah. And that sort of segues into my next question, which is I guess it's still more of your take on things. But as you made your presentation, there were several references to, TEA is going to develop certain things, and that's going to be shared with the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education is going to decide. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of the background on this bill was when it was floating through the legislature was that this might be a sneaky way for eventually this becomes a statewide curriculum, and we kind of heard some things to that end last night in a presentation by 2 sitting State Board of Education members. Mm-hmm. Is 1605 incentivizing us to follow what eventually might be some sort of statewide curriculum and instructional materials that are developed statewide?
The only incentive that's there right now is in the open education resource section of the bill, because those materials are designed specifically by the Texas Education Agency, and they are attaching $20 per student to purchase those. Well, actually, it's specifically for the printing of those materials. In a system of our size, that equates to about $1.2 million. So if there's an incentive for people specifically around open education resources, it's the decision about whether that material is appropriate for the community that you're serving kids in, and whether another material has enough value for you to let that funding source go. I will say that when it comes to our adoption of materials, even if you choose not to adopt something that's specifically on the list, you still have to adhere to specific standards that are in statute about the quality of those materials, meaning they still have to cover the standards. Like we wouldn't be able to adopt materials that are covering a portion of the standards when the law says they have to cover 100% of them. Mm-hmm. But the incentivizing, if there is any, could come in the form of whether you decide to either adopt a material that is eligible for the $20 or not. The $40, I'm not sure it's quite as, there's not quite as much incentive around the $40 only because it's accumulated. You're not losing it as a system, whereas the $20, which is directly connected to TEA, you use it in the year or you lose it, you don't keep it.
Okay. And a lot of words in your presentation around reviewing, reporting, analyzing out, and reporting things to TEA. And I always worry, when we look at unfunded mandates on our governance and our legislative agenda side, is this going to create maybe a disincentive where it becomes harder to justify using our own materials because the process required to get them approved becomes more onerous than just going and using the state openly available materials?
That's a good question. One I actually posted TEA this morning. So the rubrics that I talked about and the review committees, those reviewers are hired by the state, and they are teachers. Like, we shared out with our own teachers, if you want to participate, please do, because they're paid, and they're the idea is that they're leveraging classroom experts to help tell the basically TEA whether these are good materials or not. There's also going to be an opportunity for public and everyone to give feedback into TA's process. TA assembles all of that and then provides it to the state board, and the state board has the full governing power about whether they adopt it or not. The reason I bring all that into it is because if you choose not to leverage one of the items that are on the list, there's still a standard that you have to meet, and your process has to be articulated, and TEA has to approve that process. So there is more effort in that way than if you would just obviously just purchase something that's already on the list because the work has already been done for you. I will say that's not necessarily a bad thing in some ways, because if this process is as rigorous as described and the list that's generated generates meaningful, like research-based quality products for a school district to consider, there is a lift that you don't have to do on your own. Mm-hmm. The lift will come if you decide as a district that the resource that you want to adopt is not on that list, but it better suits your community, then that lift does exist, and the standard is kind of high.
So I guess that I wasn't going to ask this, but since you made that comment about and hopefully ensuring that the materials that we get are high quality and data-based and whatnot. It's hard to read, but I could read it more when it was up on our screen here on the IMRA reporting slide, that one.
Yeah.
So is this going to be sort of akin to, like a regulatory agency doing notice and comment, rulemaking, where they'll propose a rule and then the public can go online and anybody who wants can go in and type whatever they want in response to that rule? Is that, I see, you mentioned public comments, there's public comments here. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be for every instructional material?
Yes, so every instructional material will go through the review process with the reviewers. They'll compare those materials against the rubrics. There'll be opportunities for public comment, and all of that data is then assembled to generate these reports. These reports will all be public. So if a district chooses not to adopt something, we will be able to say this is specifically why we chose not to. Or if the state board says this is an item that did not make the list, they're going to publish their report. So you'll be able to specifically go to figure out like why are they not, what criteria did this specific instructional material not meet that prevented them from going on the list, and vice versa.
So speaking of specific criteria, what I can read here on the suitability flags by indicator, these are things that I don't think we normally, or we don't at least phrase them this way. We're reviewing for protecting children's innocence, promoting sexual health, and prohibiting forced political activity. Is every instructional material reviewed going to be reviewed by those 3 suitability flag indicators?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is there's a suitability rubric about things that are not allowed, and there are quality rubrics. So they look for, like I said, implementation, learning quality. The reviewers will have these rubrics that are approved by state board, and then they will leverage these rubrics to review the materials, and they will assemble their reviews in what you can see here, which are like a specific format, and they will provide that feedback to TEA, who will then utilize all of that to generate these reports and share them with the state board, who will then decide either to accept their recommendation or not.
I mean, isn't that a little concerning? I mean, these are not, I mean, these 3 things, and maybe these are not the only 3 things, but the ones that are flagged on this example, I mean, these are highly subjective, and people could be using this to promote their own political agendas, but any public person can go on here and flag it as a suitability flag, and it has to be reported for all time with this instructional material that might otherwise be totally suitable and appropriate for our kids?
Yeah, the part I couldn't say that I don't know for sure, and I can ask this question next time I'm in front of them, is how what process TEA utilizes to gather all the data and then to basically summarize it down into a report, whether they include everybody's comments or they summarize themes or they're looking for specific evidence of things that don't match to the rubric, and that's why it's flagged. I couldn't tell you what their process is. Like right now, you can see here it articulates very specific strengths and challenges. I couldn't tell you whether those are summarized by how TEA actually gets to that summary. I only know the process that they go through.
But on the suitability flag side, it looks like there's going to be some reporting of just sheer volume of number of public comments that flag it as suitable or unsuitable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I mean, that I've never seen this done before, to open up individual curricular materials to wide public comment. I mean, I can understand being transparent and posting things online, but that seems quite a bit different than a different approach, and one that maybe isn't even aligned to actually finding suitable instructional materials, but making some instructional materials suitable for just being cherry-picked as for political agendas. But so that seems to be the direction we're going, which is unfortunate because it's, again, the state politicizing education in a way and the work of teachers in a way that's not actually helpful in delivering us meaningful feedback to help us pick instructional materials that are actually appropriate, suitable, and high quality. So this bill has maybe a few good things in it, but seems overwhelmingly a bill with a political agenda. And I hope this is not the direction we're going. And I guess my final question would be on that front is, on the whole, from our current understanding of the bill, does this bill increase the burden on our staff and teachers in delivering and doing their jobs?
Well, the bill also protects teachers. So if you utilize the materials, you're protected from prosecution from other people around, whether they like it or don't like it. In terms of the lift,
real quick, let me just
yeah.
So is the inverse of that true, that if we as a district and our teachers are using instructional materials that we pick that someone might have a problem with, and we're not using the state one, we could be subject to prosecution in some way?
So I think the reference somewhat comes close to like Senate Bill 3, which outlines specific things teachers can say and not say or not do in their classroom, and certain materials that can be in their classroom libraries versus not. And if you utilize materials specifically on the list or that are adopted, you're immune from all of that because they wouldn't be in there is the thought. So
isn't that an incentive for us to use the eventually statewide curriculum materials? That is, well, if we use them, then there's not going to be a debate about whether or not you might have been doing something that somebody somewhere might have a problem with and sue you for or prosecute you for.
One could say that.
It's a chilling effect.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing that we're here at this point. on the burdens answer, so I'll let you continue with that.
Oh, what I was going to say is, in terms of the burden, it really depends on the question that you asked earlier about which direction a district decides to go. If you're utilizing materials because the materials that are on the list are sound and they meet the needs of the community and they're right for us, then all the lift that you would normally go through in the proclamation process of vetting out materials and getting feedback, that whole process we went through in the last board meeting, you don't have to go through all of that because it's already been done by the State Board of Education. If the lift comes when you choose to adopt something that's outside of that list because you have to meet a burden of, well, basically an expectation that TEA sets, and you have to have your process approved by them, and if you'll have to meet the law statute, but you have to do it on your own.
Which is, to be clear, we're now going to have to do that process to justify the things that we are doing now and have always done on our own.
Yeah, like right now, we have a process that we have established, and we follow the state practice, which is the proclamation process. The bar around the adoption of instructional materials has been raised, and so that lift that all these reviewers are doing, we would have to establish a local process that does those things, that's approved by TEA, that meets that same level of expectation, and that's a lift.
Yeah, so in that sense, this bill makes it harder for teachers and our staff to do what they're already doing and have always been doing.
You could say that.
Okay, that's all I have on this.
Thank you. Yeah, if I may just say a couple of things. I think Stephen is doing an excellent job being very kind in this, and I will be really direct on this. The author of this bill was given that direct feedback about the effect that it has on school districts when you add dollar amounts and when you add punitive actions to this, and you make it harder for people to do their jobs. There's no other way than to say that this is incentivizing school districts to use TEA's materials. And I think it's extremely important to note that a lot of the discussion about this leading up to this vote was about local control versus state control. And so your point right at the beginning is a really important point for us as a school district. If we want to continue to have our schools reflect what Arlington ISD wants for their schools, how the teachers need to do business in their classrooms, and the materials that they need to use in their classrooms, we have to make sure our advocacy voice is really heard with our representatives, because this took a large step pushing school districts to look at those TEA materials.
And thank you for that, Dr. Smith. And I can remember we were down in Austin last February doing our legislative visits like we do every legislative session, and the conversations that we hear when we meet with our legislators, when we bring them in one-on-one, and when we talk to anyone, folks acknowledge that we're in the middle of a teacher shortage. We're getting fewer graduates from college education programs. The job is becoming harder, and people are, the statewide attrition rate of teachers is now over 20%, whereas a few years ago it was closer to 10. We see all of these things that are sort of the canary in the coal mine saying there is a problem with what is going on in education and how it's specifically affecting educators. And people seem to acknowledge that, and they seem willing to do something about that, but then something like this comes along and they just sign off on it, and they know what it's going to do, and that is very troubling. And I would hope that as we go forward with our legislative agenda, we have to follow state law. It sounds like a lot of this is going to be kicked to TEA and the State Board of Education, so it's over our head and it's out of our control. But our teachers and our educators are going to be the ones bearing the brunt of this, and it's just really unfortunate that in this environment where we know we already have a problem with the burdens that are on educators, we're choosing as a state to make it harder. And I think that's awful.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. I concur. Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Can you go to, I think it was a slide right before this, the instructional materials and technology allotment, or maybe right after that?
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about, oops, hold on. I know what you're talking about. This one?
Yes.
No. This one?
Yes.
Or this? Or
Sorry, the one you just were on.
This one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So these are, what specifically is being incentivized are the programs on the previous slide, right? Amplify and Eureka Math.
For the $20. So these programs that you see on this slide that are in the 25-26 column that are bolded,
Yes.
all of those will be eligible for the $20 per student each year.
Okay.
And that $20 is intended specifically to help supplement printing costs
Okay.
of those materials.
And I know that right now, because even though this is still coming down the pipes, I know that right now, many districts in Texas have already been using Eureka Math, Amplify with full fidelity. And to me, as a trustee, even though this call will be absolutely staff's realm, from what I understand is that these two programs are very heavily scripted, right? And I, as a trustee, just speaking fiscally, I don't think there's any price that we can put on the quality of instruction that we offer our kids. And from what I've heard about these two programs being used in their entirety with fidelity, and some districts have even gone as far as to go before the State Board of Education to say, here's our data, and using Amplify with fidelity over the course of 3 years, this is the downward trajectory of our literacy scores. The feedback was there's too much content to pack into the time we have for our literacy block. The differentiation options are lacking, and there's not any opportunity to infuse my own style or even content knowledge into my lessons. And so as a trustee, I just want to be on the record and speak very early that those are the concerns that I've heard from curriculum instruction professionals. And if we're not required to comply with this, and if districts are not required to participate in these incentivized programs, I really hope that staff considers that we hire teachers to teach, not to read a script. And I know that you know that. We've had conversations about this, and I know that we hire teachers because they're well qualified. So I know that a lot of districts, we're bound to the state in a lot of ways, including the funding that we get. But again, there's just no price that we can put on the quality of instruction that our teachers offer to our kids. So that's all. Thank you.
I would just say you're hitting the essence of why I wanted to highlight this portion of the bill, because I think it's important to recognize that as a school system, our responsibility is to our students and our teachers, and make sure they have access to the right materials that not only meet the standards for quality education in the classroom, but also meet the needs of the community. And I think we're all kind of charged with making sure that those are the recommendations that we bring forward. That may or may result in sometimes recommendations coming where we're not going to recommend the use of the $20 and we'll forego that for something else. But we thought it was important to bring that to you early so that you can see. One other point I just want to reemphasize is these items, like the example that you used, the Eureka that everyone's using, or Amplify, they're ISBN specific. So if they adopted them a year ago or 2 years ago, the new one will have a new ISBN, and they'll have to re-adopt that brand new material all over again. They won't be able to utilize what they have and still collect the $20. A new version has to be purchased. So it's requiring us as a team to think long-term about how do we strategically leverage our funding in the most meaningful, responsible way to get the resources in front of our students and teachers that are aligned to the needs of the community and the standards, and at the same time maximize the funding sources. Because some of them are like, you get them, they just keep accumulating, and some of them they go every year, and what's the best thing for our kids, and how do you balance those two parts of the equation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Wirtz.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow. Ms. Richardson?
Dr. Wirtz, thank you for your review and the explanation of House Bill 1605. I think one of the reasons that we have so many questions, and I thank Trustee Chapa especially, is last night, several of us attended a meeting that included two of our state board educators. And that was, we listened for an hour and a half as they explained this bill in great detail. One of the questions I had that they did not answer last night for me is, if we look on local classroom review slide, can we go back to that?
Yes.
Okay, when we are looking at this and talking about, this is going to involve parent portals, they can go in, they can review everything, which is great to have that transparency for parents that want to be able to see it at that micro level. My concern is the very last one, though, that says individual parent requests initially will be processed at the campus level.
Yes.
We already talked about how much is on our teachers and our staff. Who's going to monitor this?
So we would have to establish our process, and basically it would work similar to the way we discussed in the last board meeting, which is parent would be able to go to the school, we could share with them the materials, they can look through them, and they could do it at the campus. If that doesn't satisfy the parent's request, that's when they can request the formal review that can be considered at the district level, which is not, we're not eligible to do that right now anyways because the process isn't there. But there is a little difference in this law because of that. Now, it can be triggered in other ways, but yeah, it would happen very similar to the way it was described at the last board meeting, which is review them on site. And typically it would happen in collaboration with the teacher. So if you were my classroom teacher and I was the parent and I had a concern, I could go and to you or work with the principal through a process to see the materials that are being used in your classroom. If that doesn't satisfy your request, then the formal process can be initiated, but it's not in play.
Okay. I want to make sure that I think we do a very good job already of sharing materials with our parents.
Right.
I know in many campuses, we do have parents who come and say, I want to see what my child is learning. And we do an excellent job of showing and providing that. It was just being with an official process that they're going to require in dealing with our budget and everything we deal with. I wanted to know, does that mean we're hiring additional people now for this mandate?
We don't have plans for that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Wirtz.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler, and thank you to my colleagues. And I want to piggyback on both what some things that Mr. Chapa pointed out and also Ms. McMurrow. As a taxpayer first, I've got to say I'm highly suspect based on the state's track record of whenever they try to force feed us to a specific vendor or specific materials that, and especially with what you said about every year when there's a new version, a new ISBN, we gotta pony up more money. It sounds like someone's getting rich off this and it's not necessarily us and it's not necessarily in the best interest of our children. And kind of along that line, it was prescient that we were at a meeting with State Board of Education members, and they spilled quite a bit of tea, you should have been there, about their relationship with TEA and some of the materials that's being force-fed on them is how they feel. And I guess it's no secret, Sarah pointed out a lot of the deficiencies in Amplify and Eureka, and they pointed out that their requirement is it's got to be 100% aligned to the TEKS. And are either of those 100% aligned to the TEKS?
So when TA makes their recommendation to be on the open education resource list, that would be eligible. They will definitely be
But
aligned.
currently they are not aligned to the
I'm
TEKS.
assuming that they are. I haven't dug into that standard because right now the standard is 50%. So I know they're at least meeting that threshold. It very well could be 100, but it won't necessarily mean that the ISBN that's currently in place will be the new one that they adopt. In fact, I've been told that it won't be. It'll be a new version.
Okay. Well, and I also am very concerned about adopting something that's so scripted and where the evidence, the early evidence so far is test scores aren't going up for those early adopters. Test scores are going down. So that gives me great pause. But, I mean, $20 per student is a lot to pass up, but in the end, we've got to do what's right by kids and what's going to help us reach our targets for where we want those kids to be. I just find all of this troubling. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Fowler. So echoing and adding on to Trustee Chapa's comments, I won't be here for the next session. I won't be here in 3 weeks or so. That's strange. I encourage you, my colleagues, to raise the flag of, isn't this
kind of akin to socialism or communism? Isn't that what our great state is supposedly always? We are liberty, we are free. You can go through the course of history in Germany at one point, Russia, and others that did these types of things for their people, quote unquote, to help them. This is a vast slippery slope. Being involved in my healthcare industry along the lines of regulations and standards that Mr. Chapa spoke of, and the panels and the committees that do these are standards versus actual curricula material in healthcare. So this is very different. I've never seen anything like this. I'm curious if you know about, so the call for reviewers that is out right now, do you have information on how open that process is, how stratified it is by grade level, experience level, who's reviewing those to approve those reviewers, et cetera?
I don't have that right now on hand. I know that we could probably access it. The letter to administration that went out solicits teachers that are directly connected to the kinds of materials that are being reviewed. So for example, if a math material is up for review, they're looking for people who are certified in that area, who have a certain level of years of experience in the classroom teaching that content area. They're trying to gather experts in the field to measure these new materials that are being generated by vendors up against these rubrics to provide feedback to TEA, who will then make a recommendation to the state board.
Right.
So the effort is to try to leverage actual classroom teachers to assist in that process. The makeup of the actual review committees, like which districts they come from, how many, I haven't solicited that information yet. The call, I believe, came out in February. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
And the reason I'm asking, well, I think that part is obvious, but overall, is there opportunity provided at all for the districts or public to have input into this rubric process? Or is that they're creating it and that's just what it is?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I can investigate it. Typically, when rubrics are designed or things are being developed that are provided for usage, usually there's an input process. I'd have to go back to my notes to see what TEA's, how TEA's soliciting feedback in the design of the rubrics that are then adopted by the board. But I'd have to investigate.
I'm curious because going back to my healthcare background, regulation standards development, that's what this is. The rubric is a standard.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a regulation because there's punitive ties to it. So with any of those, in the rest of the world comes a robust public comment period. And I would hope that we have some kind of opportunity to advocate and have that input. Whether it falls on deaf ears or not is a different story, but this is a standard and a regulation that is, at this point, without knowing, I shouldn't assume, but I'm making the assumption that it is usurping any kind of public input. And it's a scam.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see what it is. Right now, we've only looked at reading and math in specific areas like elementary reading and then math. Other content areas are coming. We don't know what the schedule is going to look like or what order they're going in. Once that becomes more granular, we'll have more information, but I'll look into your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, especially adding on to the fact that as a district, locally, we're going to have to upgrade, quote unquote, to this type of a process, to this type of a standard or regulation. It all goes back to this is a standard, this is a regulation. Anything else, and you know, we've got our attorney, we've got our trustee that's an attorney. I am sure there are statutes federally out there that somehow relate to this that we can call foul on if we don't have that opportunity for input. So just putting that out there. So is there, and maybe it was said in here, so you said that as far as the incentivizing with the $20 and the $40 for printed materials only, what happens if we're adopting the digital versions of these? Because there's a cost to us. Is there nothing
so they don't,
digitally?
There's no, so yeah, there's a printing and digital standard that's part of the review process. So
Right.
vendors who actually generate their materials have to have those both.
Right.
The $20 access to a school district per student for the acquisition of OER materials, there's no indication that you have to print and then submit a bill afterwards. You just, when you buy the materials, they give you the $20 and you can use it to supplement printing costs. The $40 are not for printing. It's strictly to help supplement the cost for the purchase of materials, and those are on the state board list. And I think it's important to note there are two different lists we're talking about.
Right.
There's the state board list, which would include OER materials on the list, and then the funding source for those OER materials, even though they're already on the list, get an extra $20. So you get $60 if you buy those materials because you get them because they're on the SBOE list and because you purchased them from TEA.
Okay. Okay. And the other, I guess, the last question related to the public comment opportunity against the reviewers' comments and recommendations. I would be curious, again, our input should be valued into that process. Is there how are they going to actually extrapolate, summarize that data? This has politicization written all over it, so they just need a firestorm after an alarm is set out to have thousands and thousands of public comments, and that outweighs all of these educators. Let's say that it is a good balanced process of reviewers. It negates all of their work, and here's this political hot button, and that's what we're going to recommend for SBOE. And SBOE is highly politicized and is getting more so. And there we have it. So that would be something that I would hope would be part of that process where we could have that input. There's many, many issues and points to bring up. But thank you for the information.
You're welcome.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Dr. Wertz, I have a question and then a comment.
Okay.
On the parent portal where the parents can look at the material, are we going to have it in English and in Spanish?
Yeah, there's a requirement that the materials that they provide any material that's adopted, the portal has to be made available. So if any material that's Spanish that's on the list, portal, in English, portal. It's a vendor requirement. The only hiccup to that is if you'll notice on the list, there are Spanish materials that are in development and a pilot will be launched, but the actual English is ready to go at the same time on their schedule. So you can't anticipate that there's going to be a parallel schedule for Spanish and English where they're releasing at the exact same time. We don't know that that's going to be the case, at least with OER materials. We know for sure it's not going to be with OER materials. If a vendor, an outside vendor, that makes the list, publishes both Spanish and English, the portal will be available for both. It has to be available for both, yeah.
Okay, but if it's, in the planning stage, that really isn't fair for the parents that need the Spanish version to help their kids.
Well, based on statute, if it's landing on the State Board of Education's list for eligibility, even if it's in the pilot phase, but you're adopting it because it met their standard, the portal for that portion would have to be available, or else it would be outside of the bounds of the law.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, I have to say, anytime TEA gets involved, I'm a little suspect. And the fear that I have is that what we've seen TEA do with Houston ISD, they came in and they took it over. And that's one little piece that they've chipped away at. And I can see this happening where they're coming in and telling us exactly what we need to teach, when we need to teach it, and we're having to pay for it. I think we should be very, very cautious with this. We've seen what they've done with the STAR and how they basically tricked us and didn't give us the right information, but then graded us and assessed us differently. I think we need to be very careful when TEA gets involved. And being a teacher for 30-something years, I never really thought that I'd have to be fearful of an organization. But I think they're stretching too far. I think they're trying to be too much in control of school districts, and I'm just very fearful when they start telling us what materials we should teach and when we should teach it. I hope we'll be very, very careful about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz.
You're welcome.
Madam President, can I say one thing? I
Yes,
just
sir.
wanted to publicly thank Dr. Wertz. If you noticed, he is as informed about this as anyone in the state on these
Yes.
things. And I'm extremely grateful for his work, his knowledge of what's going on this newly adopted legislation that we have, but also the implications that it has on Arlington ISD. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we move to discussion C, the 2023-2024 financial update. Dr. Smith?
We have another presentation, and it just so happens that we're talking about money now and state funds. And Darla and Carla will be coming up, Carla Martin, and we want to make sure that our trustees know where we currently are in the 23-24 year and the initial thoughts of the 24-25 school year. As everyone knows, we are in the throes of budget development season, and so these two are guiding us along the way.
Good evening, President Fowler, members of the board, Dr. Smith. Today, the purpose of this presentation is to give you an update on our fiscal year 24, where we think we may be ending up, and also just starting preliminary 24-25 budget discussions. So as an update, we adopted the budget with a $5.5 million deficit. We did a revision in February to reflect just the effect of SB2, and then now we're just giving you at this point what our projection is for the end of the year. So when we adopted the budget in June 2023, we were looking at a deficit of $5.5 million. We wanted to avoid the swing that the district was historically experiencing, and so we added a forecast of vacancy and an ESSER supplant. If not, then that original deficit would have been at $68 million. Then in February, we revised the budget only to reflect the effect of SB2, which was the increase of the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000. Looking at towards the end of the year, our projection is currently with what we know now, and this is subject to change, but we are looking more of what those vacancy savings are looking like and what that ESSER supplant is going to be. And so we are looking at around $4 million at this point in time. For the past few years, we've been sharing what that ESSER impact has done to the general operating fund. So for this fiscal year 23-24, with a $5.5 million revenue increase from the indirect costs and a $9 million supplant, we are looking at $14.7 million as the ESSER impact. So if not for ESSER, then this changes the forecast for this year to $18 million deficit. Now for the debt service fund, when we adopted the budget, we intended to use any excess funds through refunding or defeasance of debt. When we revised the budget in February, we amended it again to show the effect of SB3, and then also to show you what excess funds are on top of the required principal and interest that we have. So the end of year projections, we are projecting to show that those excess funds are going to be applied towards a defeasance. So in September of 2023, earlier this year, the board approved to any excess funds to be applied towards additional defeasance of debt. Our financial advisors identified Series 2016A of the unlimited tax school building bonds for defeasance. These bonds are actually callable in 2025, and with an estimated $14 million of additional contribution, we are estimated savings of $8.7 million in future interest payments for those maturities in 2039 and 2041. So we are working with them in closing this out in May. We're executing it. Now for our capital projects fund, when we adopted the budget, that just shows the status of the Bond 2019 program. We amended the budget to reflect the bond issuance that we had in July and also updated some of our investment income for the year. Now our end of year projections is showing what the projects that we are expecting to spend and then any to complete this year, and then any remaining, the difference between that 588 and that 118 are those future expenditures we're expecting to spend on those bond 2019 projects. Okay. And then the last of the board approved funds is our child nutrition fund. We adopted a budget with $1 million deficit, and looking towards end of year projections, we're looking at about 1.2 million. Now for an ESSER update as of February 29, at the end of February, we've spent $96.9 million of ESSER 3, with still about $24.4 million remaining. That's to last us from May through the end of the grant, which is through September 2024. And of those funds that we've spent, these are the different categories that the $96 million have been towards. And then on top of that, we've had $10.2 million in indirect costs. So that was general fund, revenue to the general fund. Okay. Before I move on to fiscal year 25, do you all have any questions on fiscal year 24? Okay. All right, so first, yes?
Mr. Chapa?
Yeah, if we can go to the 2023-24 debt service fund. So we're going to use these surplus funds to defease bonds.
Yes.
Is that a sign that we don't need these funds to preserve the scope or complete 2019 bond projects?
So the debt service fund are for bonds, are funds that we've already borrowed, and then these are the payment plans to pay them. So these are funds that we borrowed and then that we're paying early, which will save us interest payments.
So it's not possible to use this for existing bond projects?
Yes, that's correct. The debt service fund is strictly to pay debt.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the only other question I had was on the child nutrition fund. We've seen the same sort of trend here, projected a small deficit, revised upwards a little bit, and then we're not revising, but we're projecting going back down. What's keeping us in the negative on these?
So I know because of rising food costs in the child nutrition program, that's been one of the challenges that he's had. And then, but then also on top of it, our child nutrition fund has his fill rate. So there aren't as many vacancies as historically that we've had there. The state did provide some additional funding because they know the rising food costs, but again, those rising costs and then closer to filled vacancies, or not vacancies, but not having as many vacancies are the two main contributions to that.
Okay. That's all I have on that part.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Ms. McMurrow?
Thanks, Ms. Martin. Very quickly, I just had a quick question before we move on to the next part of our presentation. I did not personally learn about defeasance until I was on the board. And I think that's one of the cost-saving measures that you and your team are very intentional about. Can you just very briefly summarize what defeasance is for our community? Because this is a very good cost-saving measure, and I wanted to just kind of put things in layman's terms for anyone wondering about that.
All right, so when we borrow bonds, they lay out like how much we're going to pay over a period of years. Some of those bonds are eligible to be paid early, so defeasance is a way of paying those bonds early. It's not you can't just go and pay them early though. So there are certain methods that you would do it, and it would be defeasance is one of them. So it'd be a method of paying your bonds early.
Sorry, Ms. Feller. I do appreciate your work in doing that, because I think that is fiscally responsible, and I think that we're going to definitely reap the benefits over a span of years by taking that approach. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow. Anyone else with questions or comments before we move on? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now, when we talk about fiscal year 2025, I'd first like to just share some information that's going to factor into our fiscal year 25 budget assumptions. The first is our student enrollment history, just showing what those enrollment numbers have been throughout the years. We worked with our demographer and our internal research and accountability department to project these for next year. And so our enrollment projection for 24-25 is 53,551. Now, also just showing the attendance rate for the past few years and currently as of the 5th 6 weeks, we are at 92.8%, so just slightly higher than we did last year. Showing our property values trend, this is just to show you when we give you our next update, it will be based on April estimated values that we'll be receiving at the end of the month, but then showing you the trend of how those values change over time and how we have to just make adjustments on those. So just to make the blue bar is what we use to estimate collections, the revenue that we're going to receive, and then that yellow line is then what we use to determine the state aid and recapture. Then this last part is our tax rate history. Now, historically we were $1.04 because of compression that compresses our tax rate down as property values increase. So as you can see, for the past few years, that tax rate has been going down in line with value increase and compression, and that's what we expect to continue as long as values increase. And then this slide is just our general operating fund, revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. The teal bar is our revenue. The pink bar is our expenditures, and then fund balance is that dark blue area in the back of it. So you can see our revenue had been increasing in the previous years, mostly from some ESSER, and then expenditures have gone down because we have been doing some supplanting of ESSER as well. And then that bar in the back is that fund balance had increased to 2021-22. The reason for that decrease to 2022-23 was just to remind you all how we transferred $53 million to our capital projects fund to supplement the bond 2019 program. Okay. So in October 2024, we had a workshop with senior administrators to identify what our budget priorities will be moving into the fiscal year 24-25 budget development season. And then these were the priorities that we built the budget on. So safety and security, student achievement, cost management and efficient staffing, and competitive compensation. As we're starting our 24-25 general fund operating budget, the assumptions that we've been starting on is just to share it with you, is looking at an ADA decrease of 2.4%. Right now, we are expecting a 10% increase in taxable values. Again, when we receive that certified estimates in April, we'll have a better, that may adjust up or down. With that 10% increase, then we are looking at a 3-cent decrease in our M&O tax collection tax rate, which would reduce that overall tax rate 3 cents. And then student enrollment, as I mentioned, was at 2% decrease. And that last piece is I'm having it as net local M&O, state revenue, and recapture, because those are 3 big pieces of our revenue that go hand in hand that are affected by our ADA, our taxable values, and our tax rate. So for current year, the net of those 3 is $532 million. When student attendance, your ADA decreases and values increase, you do expect a slight decrease, the opposite effect in your revenue. And so preliminarily, it would be a $4 million increase with those inputs. Okay. This is just to show the basic allotment and how it was, it has not changed in 2020. So House Bill 3 increased the basic allotment in fiscal year 2020 by 20%, but no changes have been made to that basic allotment since 2020. Adjusting it for inflation, just with what we've experienced here locally and in the state, that would have been about an 18% increase. And so an 18% increase of the basic allotment would have brought it up to $7,260. Then recent legislation, there was talk of $90 increase, which was not close to the same rate as inflation, but just as a point of where expenses and other things have been increasing, but our revenue source has just stayed pretty flat. And then just for next steps, as I mentioned, the biggest piece we're waiting on is our certified estimates of taxable values due from our Tarrant Appraisal District. That will be at the end of this month. We will have another preliminary budget update for you all in the second May board meeting. And then our proposed budget will be at the June 6th meeting for adoption in the June 18th meeting. We will receive our certified values in July 25th, which will determine what our tax rate will be that we will adopt in September 2024. And with that, I'm open if you have any discussion or questions.
Ms. Richardson?
Mrs. Martin, thank you for explaining this and going into especially defeasance, because like you, I did not know what that was either until I joined the board. I want to look at our AISD tax rate history.
Okay.
As a community member for years and years, I have heard how high our tax rates are, how they are just the highest in our area. We all, our M&O rate, our INS rate, it is so very high. But yet when I look at the factual data here, I am seeing that since 2020, it's dropped each year, but especially in 2023 and 24, it's gone down dramatically. Is there any reason that our community doesn't understand the drop? Is there anything that we are doing to not explain this properly, that these numbers are going down, not just a little bit, but significantly?
I think part of that is because there's two pieces to levy what you're paying in taxes, right? It's your value and then the rate that you're applying to it. Values are in the Metroplex have been going up, but that's why there's compression in place to limit that, to try to lower, to have the same tax levy that you did in the prior year for the current year.
Okay.
I think it's just a little hard sometimes to understand that.
I know that.
If I could just say one thing too, is I think the practical matter of all of this isn't necessarily what AISD's tax rate is. It's what they're paying when they go to pay their taxes. And I think that's the hard part for people to determine. They see their bill go up, and it's honestly, when you take a look at our tax rate, it's because of the rising cost or the rising value of homes. It is not because the tax rate has gone up. But when you take a look at your tax bill, your dollar amount that you're paying annually is going up. And a lot of that is because of those rising home values. And that's a really hard thing to explain. I know I've seen some of the presentations that were done in AISD before I got here. I know that that was a point that has been made over and over and over again.
Yes.
But the fact is, when people go to pay those taxes and they see the total dollar amount going up, that's the thing that they have the hardest time with.
So as an AISD resident, I got our property tax bill in the mail this week. I don't know if anybody else did. If you haven't, you should probably check your mailbox. It's there. It's scary. It's high. It's increased again. One of the things that I have had questioned before is that when we are paying these tax bills, and we know that we see on their AISD, one of the things I want to make sure that is very clear to our community stakeholders is when they are paying that money, it does not come to us directly. It goes to the state. This is not money that we get to put in our pockets and start funding our schools with immediately. And I think that is misinformation that people often don't understand, that they are not paying that directly to us. Is there anything that we can do better to communicate that with community members so they understand? That's more of a question for you, Dr. Smith.
Yes, I realized that at the last minute.
Sorry.
A couple of things on it. I think we have to be able to show tangible examples to people. I think, again, people see it in their mailbox and they don't realize what you've discussed in this board meeting. They just see that their tax bill has gone up. And that is just the truth of the matter most of the time. And I think we have to show them the examples. This chart is wonderful. This graph is wonderful, excuse me. But I think we also have to show them, here's what your tax bill looks like. Here's why your tax bill looks that way. And then the other piece of the puzzle that you just brought up is the whole idea of recapture and everything. Is these property values go up more and more and more. The school district does not keep the increased amount of money that's collected in these taxes. And a lot of people think we do. That's that whole idea of recapture, is those values keep going up. The state takes that money and distributes it to somebody else. And so I think it is, I'll stay out of the politics discussion of it right now, but I think it's a really challenging situation for the average taxpayer because they just look at the dollar amount like most of us do when we pay a bill. And they don't realize, they just see AISD next to it. They don't realize that the state is taking a big chunk of that money and redistributing it somewhere else.
It is very hard for me as a trustee to sit here sometimes and hear what people say of, why do we need a bond? We're already giving you so much money. No, that's not actually how this works at all. One of the things that I really appreciated, your very last slide, can we go back to that? No, I'm sorry, second to last slide. Yep, that one right there. Showing this right here, that for the last 3.5, 4 years, that our allotment has stayed the same, even with the dramatic increase of inflation, that we are so far behind and we are not keeping up with where we need to be. Thank you for showing this information. It breaks it down and puts it in a very black and white, tangible way that we can read. So thank you for doing that. Mrs. Martin, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. I do want to point out, though, when you're receiving the tax bills right now, they're applying current year tax rates to that, but because of compression, once values are settled and all of those, that's not going to be the tax rate that's going to apply to those values.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. McMurrow?
Very briefly, thank you, Ms. Martin. I just wanted to, again, echo what Ms. Richardson mentioned about this very slide. This is key context for when we are looking at budgets that not just Arlington ISD is adopting this summer, but any ISD, because not only are we not adequately getting funding from the state, given the rapidly rising inflation rate, this is at the same time we are losing those federal ESSER dollars. It is extremely important that when we look at the fiscal responsibility and the numbers and all that, we're considering both things, because I think the most current is 85%, maybe it's more than that now, but about 85% of our budget goes toward payroll. And with all of this going on, we can't not pay the payroll. In fact, we have to attract talent so that we can put the best educators in front of our students. So I just hope that anyone watching or listening, if you remember one thing from this presentation, please keep this chart in mind and the fact that we are losing those federal ESSER dollars. That has very drastic implications on, again, all school districts in Texas. And I hope that our legislators are listening as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Fowler. If we can go back to the general operating fund revenue, expenditures, and fund balance slide, it's right before the 24-25 budget priorities. Yeah, that one. So just to spring off of Ms. Richardson's comments and Dr. Smith's comments, you can see that what you can see here is think back to the 2014-15 year, if you're a property owner in Arlington, and you can think about how much property values and your property taxes have increased since 10 years ago. But if you look at this, it's relatively flat, and it did go up a little bit after, if you 1920, but you remember we passed the VATRE, and I think that contributed to it too, but then you see compression kicks in, we're coming back down. So this is relatively flat, even though property values have been going on up quite a bit, and I think it's important to remember, as Ms. Richardson and Dr. Smith hit on, the school finance system is very different than how financing works for other government entities. When you get your property tax bill and there's a line item for Arlington ISD or City of Arlington or any of these other taxing entities, those taxing entities do get that money directly, and they are more direct beneficiaries of the property values going up. But the state school finance system is actually designed to tamp down the rate of revenue increases for school district and hold them more relatively flat. And then, as Dr. Smith mentioned, we are, as a district now, reaching a point, because the recapture hasn't been adjusted maybe as it should have been over the last 20 years, but where even districts that are, despite the way property values have increased, we have historically been considered a property poorer district. Even property poorer districts like Arlington now are hitting recapture, and we're having to pay back into the system. So as property values go up, local funding increases for us, state funding goes down, and that's why, and I think it's very complicated, and that's why folks don't understand. They see that their taxes are going up. They don't understand that as a school, it's like, why are the schools always asking for money? Well, the system is designed to where we don't benefit in the same way as other taxing entities when it comes to that. So I wanted to just springboard off that. On this slide, I asked you to bring this up though, because you notice we've been building fund balance over time, and then there is that dip from 21-22 to 22-23, and you mentioned the $53 million that we designated for the capital projects fund. What's the status of that $53 million? Did it end up getting spent on capital projects, or is that something that might be available for us if we needed to access that and bring it back to fund balance for more general expenditures?
Yes, so those $53 million is sitting in has been set aside in our capital projects fund. The intention was to use it in the event that the Bond 2019 program needed some supplement funds. And yes, that those funds are fully available if needed to be transferred back to general fund if needed.
Okay, and that's good to know. I mean, we do have a healthy fund balance. We've historically had one, but that helps because I think we're going to be in the position, as your initial projections show, we're going to be in the position of deciding soon, more directly what next year is going to look like. And that's helpful to know that we have even that much more runway if needed, because, the ESSER funded positions are running out. They were time limited, and it's really unfortunate that we are not able to accommodate everybody that we would like to keep directly. I would say that folks, should look at in the next, 60 to 90 days, as in every year, we're going to have hundreds of openings come up because, folks let us know towards the end of the year that they're not coming back or they're retiring for whatever reason, and I think we're going to be able to accommodate a lot of those folks. But that process would have been made easier if the state had helped us out. But it would be made easier if we had access to those funds to give us a longer runway to more strategically think about how we want to employ folks and what roles we want to keep going forward, and how we, especially when we get to the question of compensation and benefits, give us some flexibility there to maintain our competitiveness on the compensation side. On the 24-25 general operating fund assumptions slide, I had just a couple questions on that, or a question on that. Is the it looks like 3.8 cent reduction in the M&O rate, that is the projected required compressed rate?
That's currently, they have, TAA has not established the specific rate as of right now. These are estimates that we are doing just based on a 10% increase in taxable values. Mm-hmm. We'll get a better idea once we get the actual values. But because of compression, if values is looking like are increasing, then if the actual range is decreasing itself, so there will be compression in the tax rate.
Okay. And then I had a question, and this is just a broader question, and I don't know, maybe this is too abstract to look at now, and it may be part of a broader discussion. But I'm looking at our staff count, all funds. We're projecting to hold pretty steady from 23-24 to 24-25, and that has, I just off the top of my head, I feel like as a trustee, when we go out and we talk, we say that we have about 8,500 employees in AISD, and we've been saying that for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I noticed one of your first slides shows that our enrollment's been declining. And I think some folks would look at that and say, well, we need to bring staff into line with attendance. And I think there's probably going to be some depending on how state funding goes in the future, we may be in the position of having to look very carefully at that. But I wanted to ask the flip side of that. Are we seeing, and maybe this is even more of a question for Dr. Smith, are we seeing a benefit, though? Are we seeing something like, by maintaining our staff at sort of relatively constant levels with declining enrollment, are we getting a net benefit of that in some way, and maybe smaller class sizes, or staff to provide more individualized instruction or targeted intervention, things like that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to comment on that. I do think that we are seeing added benefit, and I think it's important to note, coming out of COVID, things changed for teachers in the classroom. And what I've noticed in being at AISD, and again, this is based on observations and anecdotally, but our class sizes have been relatively good in the classrooms that I have been in. And I think that that is a priority that we really need to think about moving forward as well. Yes, with declining enrollment and potentially shrinking budgets because of lack of state action on funds, we're going to have to wrestle with what's the right size of our staff to do what we want to do in Arlington ISD for our students. But I think what I would say right now is the best thing that we can do for teachers is keep those class size low, support them really well, train them really well, give them quality professional learning. And the staff that we have, that 8,500 number right now, I feel comfortable is doing that. Are there tough times potentially ahead? Yes, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I'm nervous about the future, but I do think that the benefits that I can see from Arlington ISD's approach have really probably paid off for our kids over the past few years.
And I'm glad to hear that, because that's sort of my impression too. And I mentioned this because I don't remember exactly what forum that it was, but I've been attending, I'm not up for election, but I've been attending some candidate forums. And there have been some questions that I think got in the vicinity of, well, your enrollment's gone down by what it's gone down over the last 10 years. Why haven't you seen a commensurate reduction in staff? And my answer has been along these lines as well. I don't think it's quite that simple. Also, something that's not in your presentation, but that was in a presentation more recently, is our number of socioeconomically disadvantaged students have also, the percentage of students we serve that are socioeconomically disadvantaged has increased over time. And we know that it takes significantly more resources to get kids from underprivileged backgrounds to the same places that their more affluent peers. And so I think it's important to remember that yes, tough times may be coming. Yes, we may need to be doing some balancing to bring it in line, but it's not as simple as a one-to-one. As our enrollment goes down, that we need to be commensurately reducing the number of staff that we have, because those staff are performing jobs and functions that our students need. And that's ultimately where we're going to end up, is if we need to have more staff so we can do right by our kids, I think we're going to need to do whatever it takes to stay there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Dr. Raj?
Thank you, President Fowler. Thank you for all the information. While we're on this slide, I did have a question. Do you know, you put the projected 4 million reduction on that last row. Do you recall what it was for this current year, the 23-24 year?
Oh, compared to previous year?
Yeah, I mean, did we lose
No.
potentially 4 million, 5 million? It's curiosity, but it's also contextual in that there's been very good budget management to where we are now maybe 4 million deficit. And these right here might show that if we didn't have those, we'd actually have an absolute balanced or surplus budget. So, don't need it right now, but just something for the future to consider. And then just some comments to Ms. Richardson's comments. These are issues that have gone on for years. And from an historical perspective, I think it was Gio Capriglione as a state representative that initially put up a transparency bill that was shot down, that would explain on everybody's tax bills what that dollar amount is, what goes to the state, what is actually local, and so that would provide some context. Again, it was shot down. This was at least 3 sessions ago, maybe it was 4. It was right after he got in, and he was, I think, chastised as a newbie that, oh, no, we don't do that here.
Why? Why would you not want, why? No, hold on a second. When I go and eat at a restaurant, I want to see what my appetizer and my dinner and my dessert and my drink cost. I don't want you to give me a bill at the end of my meal that says $40. No, where did my money go? So why in the world would we not tell our residents where their money is going? That seems absolutely backwards. That when people say they want transparency, why in the world would we not want to give them transparency? Why would the state legislators not want to show where money is going, unless it's because they're keeping the money at the state level and not adequately distributing where it should go?
Well, that would be a question to follow up with our
I'm sure they
constituency.
can't wait for me to ask
Our
them.
delegation, and beyond, our legislative consultants, et cetera. It is something that I believe there has been a bill like that brought up every session. And every session it just doesn't make it. So just historical context there, and yes, they have opportunity and some explaining to do. As far as the communication out to the community, no matter what we do, and I think we're all very engaged in the community and share these messages. But overall, as Dr. Smith stated, you look at your bill and it's just going up. That's what people look at. Maybe not for our district, but perhaps. Maybe it's a TASB, maybe it's a consortium of districts that get together, but perhaps doing like Schoolhouse Rock type videos. One, Justin pops up and says, I want to wear my shirt. On
I see a team of 8 training.
two things, the tax rate explanation, and then also specific to our successes and our diligence here, and this is with the help of compression, although it's help hindrance, of having last year no new revenue or lower than the effective tax rate was lowered. That is a huge, huge thing. So if we had some little videos like that we could start posting out there. And again, this is just a suggestion. This is an operational thing, and I am by no way trying to put more work on Ms. Foster back there. But that might be helpful. People run on little videos all the time, and maybe something like that could actually catch a little bit of fire. So just a thought. But thank you for all the information. That's all I have.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Martin, so much. We appreciate you. We will now address the consent agenda items, which consist of routine items grouped together for approval as one item. Unless removed from the consent agenda, these items will be acted on at one time with no discussion. Trustees, are there any requests for items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Please vote. Motion carries. We now come to our open forum for non-agenda items. Ms. Forsberg, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding non-agenda items?
No, ma'am, no requesters.
Thank you, Ms. Forsberg. We now move on to our superintendent's report.
I know that's what everybody's been waiting for all evening. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to share some information about exciting news that's happened in the district over the past couple of weeks. As you all know, last Monday was totally awesome for Arlington ISD, as everyone in the district had an opportunity to experience a total eclipse. I want to commend everyone for making the day run so smoothly, from our teachers and staff to our curriculum and instructional department who helped weave instructional ideas into the planning for the day. I got a chance to watch the eclipse with the students at Jones Academy of Fine Arts and Dual Language, and it was great to see so much excitement and enthusiasm for what could be a once-in-a-lifetime event. I do want to give our senior staff some kudos too. You know, we all heard the concerns about the eclipse prior to the actual day, and we spent some time as a senior staff making contingency plans to make sure that everything ran smoothly. We're grateful that it did, but we were also prepared if it didn't, and I'm grateful for them for doing that. This Monday was also a great one for our district as we got to honor 7 Sam Houston seniors for being named TCU Community Scholars. These students went through rigorous interviews and planning to earn these scholarships that are valued at $290,000 each and include a semester to study abroad. Sam Houston is one of 13 schools that participate in the program, and our Texans continue to lead the way. Tuesday night, the board and I had the pleasure of honoring our 23-24 Arlington ISD Teachers of the Year at the PDC. Each year, the district hosts a banquet for the campus teachers, and it was wonderful to get to meet the 75 that we're honoring this year. We have over 4,000 outstanding teachers in the district, and these are great representatives of the outstanding work that happens day in and day out in our schools. Our archery teams were on the mark. Everybody got that? Yes. Our archery teams were on the mark at the National Archery in Schools State Tournament. A team from Martin High School won first place and set a new state record with its score. A second team from Martin finished third, and 6 of our girls placed in the top 10 in state. Even better than that is our archers earned more than $18,000 in scholarship money for their work at state. Thanks to everyone who helped make the Family Expo and Resource Fair happen last Saturday at our CTC. The 5th annual event was a great opportunity for families to get exposure to new interests for their children and see all partners we have in the area who are there for them. We had more than 75 vendors at the fair that provided a mix of resources, tips, and activities. And finally, if we have any potential teachers watching out there, don't forget our annual teacher job fair is this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Sam Houston High School. We will have principals and hiring managers at the event looking for new teachers to join us in the 24-25 school year. You can find out more information on our website at aisd.net/jobs. That concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Do I have any trustees with reports? Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, President Fowler. I just wanted to thank our board. I'm just so moved that we named a junior high tonight after someone who was so impactful to thousands of students and to East Arlington and to Arlington and even the whole state. There is something that wasn't said tonight, and that is that even before this junior high was a namesake consideration, Joey Rodriguez has a scholarship in his name for aspiring athletic coaches, and his impact and his influence just continues and continues. And namesakes are never easy because there are just so many deserving folks, and we know that Corrigan is our architect for this project, and we know that they've been very involved in working with the client, so to speak. And in this case, it's the students and the faculty that will be moving into this new site, this new junior high. So I'm looking forward to their continued work so they can continue to listen to that part of our community. And I, from the bottom of my heart, just want to thank our board for your support on that tonight. And I want to, of course, thank Lena, who is the love of Joey's life, and their 3 children, Mila, Lola, and Ezra. I cannot imagine the roller coaster of emotions this has all been, but I think I know that this is the beginning of a very exciting journey and the continuation of a great legacy. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Murr. And I want to say that for the Carter name, we're not trying to erase it or throw it away. We will be doing something to honor the Carter name, and that tradition will continue. We don't know exactly what or how, but that name will not be erased. We'll be doing something with that name, so I want people to know that. I had the pleasure of attending Arlington Early College High School Culture Fest on Saturday, and they had delicious food, and they had music, and they had dancing, and it was just a really lovely affair. And I would love to see some of our other campuses start with this tradition and have a culture fest and recognize all the different cultures that are here in Arlington. So I really appreciated being invited to that and had a really good time. And I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Hill. I had a phone call today from a teacher with a concern on her campus, and I reached out to Dr. Hill, and He could have sent a staff member, or he could have said, okay, I'll check on that later. Dr. Hill immediately left and went to that campus to check on the campus and check on the teacher. And I just want to say thank you, Dr. Michael Hill, for stepping in and calming a situation and taking fast action, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for doing that. And with that, we are adjourned.